thank you so much for joining our session today on responsible cabin design. I'm CALLIE, TEDDER-HARES. I'm from Volume Creative. We're a small design agency here in the UK. I'm very excited to be moderating this, as thinking responsibly and leading innovation is very much close to our hearts as a practice. So I'm just really honoured to be up here with this panel to be able to, talk about this more. This is obviously a very big topic, and there's really lots and lots of conversations we can have about it. And today we don't have all the answers, but what we want to do is to be able to facilitate really open dialogue about learning experiences, about thinking differently, and about sparking ideas for change today and how we can change and affect change in the industry. Today specifically we're talking about cabin design, really because it seems like a good starting point for what's a really huge topic, and it's purely down to being able to kind of create big change, and it has to do with volume and scale. So that's where we're going to focus our conversation on today. So enough from me, but I thought I'd just hand it over to you guys to introduce yourselves today.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. My name is Søren. I'm the managing director at Dansk Wilton in Denmark. At Dansk Wilton, we design and manufacture bespoke design carpets for the hospitality industry worldwide. So for us means land-based hotels and obviously also cruise ships. So we are happy to be here today and take part of the discussion, and we have some interesting things to discuss.
Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Anna. I'm the lead build department for Cradle to Cradle Products Innovation Institute. We are based in Netherlands, and we have also office in US. We develop like a framework around materials and products to be more sustainable and more circular, and looking forward to explore how we can bring that framework and experience to the cruise industry, and especially to support design of cabins.
Hi everyone, my name is Meyer Werft, and I lead the interior design department for Holland America Group, which is 4 cruise brands that all have different identities: Holland America, Seabourn, Princess, and POA. I've been in the industry for 20 years, and sustainability is a topic that's really close to my heart. I just see in the last 2 decades, thinking about the demographics of cruising, we can't really rely on designing and relying for the demographics that's producing right now. We really have to think about making sure that our children and our grandchildren are really excited about cruising too. And I think sustainability is at the heart of that. And selfishly, as a design lead for 4 cruise brands, I would really love to see the industry create products that are sustainable with a strategy, are beautiful in looks, are durable because they will be cleaned like crazy for the next decades for sure, and also meets a price point that the cruise lines will be specifying. So it's a big ask, but there's absolutely products out there that are being developed, and we really want more of that. So I'm honored to be here and start this conversation.
Thank you, Meyer. Today, we unfortunately, guys from Meyer Werft wasn't able to make it. That's why we have an empty chair here. But as a business, they've been leading a lot with eco cabin prototypes. So before we kick off the discussion, really about kind of each of the work that you guys are doing, we have a video that very kindly recorded for us to talk a bit about what they're doing.
Good afternoon and greetings to London. Actually, I was supposed to be in person in London for this very interesting panel on future cabin design and sustainability within cruise ship design. But unfortunately, I'm not able to travel to London at the moment. But I'm very glad to be able to provide you an update on what we are doing on sustainable cabin design in the Meyer Group. My name is Gijs Treppel and I'm working as a Program Manager Sustainability for the Meyer Group. And the topic that I want to tell you a little bit about today is the Eco Cabin project, what we are having at the Meyer Group at the moment, together with different partners in Germany and around. The Eco Cabin is actually a project where we are trying to find a holistic approach of building up a sustainable cabin. Sustainability in the full approach of what you can do based on energy efficiency, but also materials. One of the main topics on sustainability, what you hear all about around the world at COP26 and wherever you talk about sustainability, is actually the CO2 footprint. The CO2 footprint, everybody knows, if you're burning any kind of fossil fuel, you're producing CO2. So the first thing what we are looking at, of course, is how to actually reduce the amount of fuel that you need to burn while providing holidays on board of a cruise vessel, so living in a cabin. The idea of the Eco Cabin picks this up through trying to develop a self-sufficient cabin that does not need any power supply from external sources anymore, which means that the cabin is fully capable of providing its own power, what they would need for the use of the cabin. The idea is that, for example, we are using a climate system, so an air conditioning system in the cabin that sucks in the air from outside directly into the cabin and provides the cabin with fresh air and pushes out the used air directly again out of the cabin. So no interference with the rest of the cruise vessel. By this, we are hoping that we, first of all, of course, can reduce the amount of energy that the cabin uses, but at the same time, you can also be more flexible in the cruise ship design due to the fact that you don't need such a big centralized air conditioning system anymore. At the moment, we are trying this out as a prototype, and it looks like that it is going to work fine, but also that it will have to have some adaptations in the cabin design itself. So that is one of the parts that we are looking at. But of course, as long as you're using an air conditioning system within a cabin, even if it is a self-sufficient one, it needs power to run. So where is this power then coming from? One of the ideas is using actually the power of the sun. Quite often cruise vessels are sailing around in beautiful weather areas where the sun is shining bright. So why not use this in a PV system that you can put on, for example, the balconies? There are different ideas to actually generate power. It is the question in the end whether you can get a full power for the whole cabin, but at least why not try how far you can get. So the idea of reducing the amount of power, if you do it on a relatively small scale for a cabin, the power that a cabin needs during operation is not even that high. But if you multiply that with all the cabins that you're having on board of a cruise vessel, of course you get quite a high power that you can actually save if you do something in the area of the cabin. But at the same time, the people, of course, the passengers on board of a cruise vessel, they need to feel comfortable on board of a cruise vessel, but also have the idea of doing something good while sailing on a cruise vessel. The cruise industry is actually living from a nice, healthy world. The people are wanting to see and wanting to actually feel the beauty of the world through cruising around the world. So the cruise industry is actually living from a sustainable world. And that is also necessary in the materials that we are using on a cruise vessel. And that is another topic that we are looking at the Eco Cabin project. What kind of materials that you can actually use in the design of a cabin that you can actually use again and again. So the cradle-to-cradle principle, for example, or at least the recyclability. And that is also a topic due to refits. of cruise vessels, because the cruise vessels will go through a refit probably several times during its lifetime. Is it then possible to design a cabin in such a way that the materials coming out of the cruise vessel, coming out of the cabin during a refit, are easy to recycle, easy to actually reproduce, or even if you look at the design of a cruise vessel from the beginning, is it possible to easily exchange such a cabin with reproducible and recyclable products? That is the whole principle of the Eco Cabin. It is running until somewhere next year. Depends a little bit on what the end date is going to be. We have seen a lot of challenges in the project, but also a lot of successes. So we are running in the good direction. But one thing that we learn every single day during sustainability topics: nobody can do this alone. We are relying on our partners, we are relying on the passengers, we are relying on our own customers. We need to do this together. So hopefully you're having a very interesting panel discussion that unfortunately I'm not capable of attending myself, and that you have had some input and some ideas from what I've just told you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to hand it over to you guys, really, to build on that discussion. And I know you've worked on some of that with those guys, and you've worked together. So I'm going to hand it over to you guys to build on that.
Yeah, but again, I'm representing the vendor side of this panel, being a carpet manufacturer. We do that every day. So we have put for many years the strategic element of sustainable product development and production on our agenda, and we have very early in the phase actually adapted the cradle-to-cradle certification process in how we work with sustainable carpet production. So in that front, in that context, I think we are pretty in a good position, but not that I will like to share another 5-minute video, but very important also, how do we handle all the waste that is actually generated in this industry? Whenever a new ship, a ship is going to a dry dock or a hotel is being renovated, to be honest, there is a lot of waste that are generated. A lot of carpet has to be reused in a smart way. So beside being very focused on creating sustainable products from the very start, we are also very focused on how can we be a professional partner in the circular system. So I'd like to show you a short video. It's only a 1-minute video on a pilot project we did together with the Scandinavian-based cruise ferry operator CALLIE, where we took back old carpets and recycled them into new materials. And then I think it's a very important topic that we also consider at the same time as creating sustainable products. So if you could play it. As you can see, it was just a short example of how an old carpet that in the past was being sent to the incinerator station can be recycled into new materials. It can be acoustic materials, it can be hard surface plates that can be used in the furniture industry. Actually, from this hard surface plates, you can also create internal signage for the cruise ship or for the hotel. So I think we all have a big task here and make sure that all the waste that we generate during dry docks and land-based hotel renovations are recirculated and reused into new building materials. So we discussed here at lunch, everybody talks about, it's made from recycled plastic from the oceans. We somehow have to stop that the plastic ends in the ocean. So we have to design product. At Dansk Wilson, we have a saying, we say design for disassembly. So whenever we are making a new product or a new concept, we make sure that once it ends its life, after 10 years or 15 years in a hotel or cruise ships, it can be reborn into a new product and have a new life. And that's especially where the cradle-to-cradle system really helps us to make sure that once we design the new products, it's all based on healthy materials that can be recycled at a later stage.
That's a really nice segue, actually, just over to you, Anna, talking about cradle-to-cradle.
No, thank you, and thank you, Sohan, for the kind of like reference to the cradle-to-cradle certification process. So, cradle-to-cradle certify is a kind of a framework that has been in place in different industries for the last 10 years, and it's like a material and product standard that focus not only on the environmental impacts, but sustainability as a holistic approach, thinking about materials health, about product circularity, and then focus more on the organization and the aspect that is about clean energy and climate impacts, as well as water and soil stewardship, and then finally the social aspect that we consider with social fairness. And it's bringing these 5 different categories all together on a kind of like a holistic approach, that working with manufacturers and producers, supporting not only how to manufacture better products, but also how to design them as well. And then at the end, also consider how the products will be used and where they can be installed. Like Sohan already gave us some examples of carpets and how they can approach, but the framework thinks in different angles and bring that all together. We were also discussing during the lunchtime that it's important when we think about design of the product of the cruises or the ships, also like how you approach different design options, how you turn products more durable, but also that are able to extend their lifespan, even if it's by reusing or recycling, but also like be possible to be disassembled and then be used for different purpose. Affordability, we were discussing that is quite important, but then we need to think about the entire life cycle of a product, and not only the manufacturing process or the in-use, but also like what is the end of life of that product, and how that responsibility is extended as well, not only to the producers or the owners, but also to the consumers and how they use the product. So our standard, we have listed more than I think its last counting was 10,000 products that has been certified, and that's like a result of recognition and of an effort that cradle-to-cradle principles should be start implementing at materials and products level as well. And I think that's kind of like the common aspect of all us here, is how we can drive the industry, how we can drive manufacturers, designers to just move for this more sustainable and holistic approach. It's a long way, but this is probably one of the baby steps that we need to start discussing and considering across all the stakeholders.
Amazing. Thank you, Anna.
Yeah, welcome.
I know we wasn't that long ago, just a few weeks ago in Miami, there was a similar panel, and we thought it'd be great if you could talk us through a little bit of that and some other bits, but really kind of some of the outtakes from that and some of the discussions that was happening at this kind of event as well.
Yeah, sure. So only a couple of weeks ago, I was on the sustainability panel in Miami, and that topic was the business case of sustainability. And we were discussing, really it's not just a business case, but a commitment that we really need to be making and thinking about now, because we have a long ways to go. The fact that we have a panel now discussing it and we had it in Miami means that it's a topic that people are really interested in, that we have a great opportunity to discuss more. The takeaways from Miami, I would say, is this topic is a really big elephant in a really big room. There's a jungle of where you could even go with sustainability. There's, greenwashing and just the word sustainability, and then there's sustainability strategies and practices and materials and how a designer specifies, and it's just a whole lot that honestly a lot of companies are doing amazing things in their own silos. What's lacking is there's really no central platform of communication, of education, of discussion with a commonality for marine interiors on this topic, which I think there will be now. There's been so much interest and energy about this. So that was one of the takeaways. Also, we have identified there's 3 pillars of opportunity for marine interiors that would be amazing for whoever has this tingling in their heart that, these things matter to you. We all need to get involved and step up. And the 3 pillars we found were, 1, on the design specification side. As a cruise line designer, as third-party designers that work with brands, are we asking, what is your sustainability strategy to vendors as part of the elevator pitch, for example? I mean, I've been in the industry for 20 years, and to be completely vulnerable with you, I've only started asking this question a couple years ago, and I wondered, I kind of was questioning to myself, like, why haven't I been asking this for 20 years? And honestly, it was because I was so busy. I was trying to build a team. I was trying to design one thing after another. There's so many priorities that we have because the cruise industry went a marathon a minute, as we all know, before the pandemic. But that's not an acceptable excuse. Not any, it wasn't then. I mean, I thought if I could have asked this 20 years ago, just think, what kind of influence that is. And if we can all ask that together as a unified voice, how amazing that would be to vendors. But we as designers need to prioritize what we're asking for in the first place so that we don't have this dilution in the industry, but we have focus for the vendors. Another opportunity is in legislation. I mean, IMO is a very, very strict fire rating that requires a lot of chemicals that probably negates things that are sustainable. So we could dig very deep into that of how we even crack that code. And the third one is about waste. Ships are being built for new build. Ships are being retrofitted twice every 5 years because of regulation in dry docks. What are we doing with all of this material? How are vendors creating products that will have a life cycle, as Soren was talking about? Not just that it has a sustainability strategy up front, but also how does it go back into a life cycle, which is really inspiring and necessary. Yeah.
Excellent.
We actually have a saying in Dansk Wilson, we say, don't let the perfect be in the way of the good. So sometimes when we are sitting and say, how can we reach this goal, we cannot solve the problem 100% today, but we need to do small trials like we did with Color Line, try to find our way, how we can get to the final goal. And I think in many ways we feel like modern explorers, that we know exactly what our goal is, but we don't really know the way yet. So, but I think it's very important that everybody in this industry, it's a partnership. Mm-hmm. As a vendor, you can't do it alone. You have to do it together with the designers, the ship owners, the hotel operators, and to create this circular economy and stop that we have generating all this kind of waste. Mm-hmm. Because when we are coming with 20,000 square meters of new carpet, there's another 20,000 square meter of old carpet that has to go. Mm-hmm. And today it goes into the incinerator. And then you can say we are so good in Europe, at least in Europe, that we can make electricity or heat out of it. But in many places, they don't have that. It goes to the landfill.
Yeah.
And actually, you've just given me another really good segue.
Good.
Talking about kind of community and not doing this alone, we wanted to do this next part of the session a little bit differently. And rather than holding questions to the end, we'd like to open up the floor as we talk through topics to have one or two questions within that, so that it is really an open dialogue with yourselves and the panel. I think when we're on a topic, if you just want to raise your hand, a microphone will find you, and yeah, we can kind of have that discussion together. I wanted to start the conversations really talking about constraints. And we talked before, just kind of like, what's unique to the industry is that you have a reference ship, and with that comes constraints. So how do we design at the forefront, knowing what constraints we have, or how do we think about that, which is unique to the industry, to be able to make responsible decisions and create responsible experiences for the customer?
I can start,
yeah.
I was involved with kind of napkin sketch phase of cabin designs for our Holland America ship. This was 7 years ago. And just reflecting and listening to Geist's video, I thought, oh my God, if I even knew about that 7 years ago. One of the constraints for new build and designing is that usually owners have negotiations about a reference ship. So that's kind of like the new up and coming different size hull. You can change your public spaces around, have more staterooms, whatever. And then usually the negotiation is after the reference ship, then you kind of have a cut and repeat over the next X amount of ships. So it may take 6 years for this whole process, but it may be a window of opportunity of 6 months where you can actually insert different ideas, different materiality to change the specifications and to even be in the conversation of negotiation. So one of the constraints is really awareness. I mean, if we as designers understood what products were even out there, if the shipyards partnered with vendors and knew what things they can offer and, you know, discuss, negotiate, whatever, then I think that there's a really great opportunity, at least on the new build side, so that could be low-hanging fruit for the future, right? And then we have all of the ships that are already out in service that we want to be working out as well, because cabin upgrades, cabins are heavily in use all the time. And so for a brand, we try to have a 5 to 7 year life cycle. And that's a lot of material every 5 to 7 years, if you think about that. So
I guess what I'm taking away from that is when you have that small window of opportunity, almost having the foresight and the planning so that you're planning for when that opportunity is, rather than trying to, it's not an afterthought, so that there's kind of clarity or openness on when there's that opportunity, particularly for making that change.
And awareness. I mean, we need to know about products out in the market. You know, products in our design resource library that checks all of those marks for sustainability is like this small. You know, if we're designing new builds and we're designing refits at a quick pace, we need to know about these products. You know, they need to be out there.
Yeah, I could add that to the awareness is also about training and knowledge sharing as well, because some industries are already a bit more advanced, and we know that some regions as well are looking at circular economy, for instance, for a few years now, and we know that like Europe has regulation that are a bit more strict than in other regions, but also like training and knowledge and sharing this experience, case studies, and bring that as a collaborative approach that's quite, it's turning the constraint on an opportunity as well, and I think that's quite important. May you touch a really interesting point on the regulation as well, and that is, I link that with the procurement side. Especially in Europe, we are seeing like green procurement policies being thought at member state level as well as European level, but also like new initiatives around sustainable products that will be launched in the next couple of months, and that will change as well kind of like the approach that organizations will be responsible at the end of the life or during even the design process of products.
Amazing.
I would say, seen from a vendor perspective, being both focused on the land-based hospitality and the marine-based hospitality, we have seen that the land-based hospitality is a little bit in front of the maritime industry when it comes to demanding sustainable solutions. Some of our biggest international hotel chains, like the Marriott and Hilton's, whenever they're building a new hotel, for example, the Marriotts, they have a clear demand. Say, if we build a new Marriott hotel, it has to be minimum gold level in the LEED system. So that means that that hotel has to be built of purely environmental friendly products. It goes for the air conditioning, the carpets, the textiles, whatever you put in that hotel. And actually the same chain, or the Marriott, has 100% goal that once this hotel has ended the end of life, that hotel should be able to dismantle it completely, and all the building materials should be used for new materials. Mm-hmm. So we see that the land-based hospitality industry is a little bit ahead of the cruise industry. And again, coming back to a reference ship, if you're doing a new ship today that is going out in next year, then the reference ship is something that was designed 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So in that way, we don't really implement all the new technologies that also Gis told about in his video.
Yeah, and I think in his video as well, when he was just ending and he was talking about community and doing this together, I think is again part of the awareness, and I really kind of all having a part as both designers, as well as vendors, as well as legislation, as well as ship owners. And I was curious. Oh, there you go. Sorry.
I was just wondering, when you say that Marriott has this goal of delivering and also demolishing, who is actually checking that? Because one thing is to say it, but how do we verify that this is actually happening?
I can take that, Sohan, if you want. Yes. So the building schemes, and I come from the building industry, so there are different international building schemes that are developed and certified by third-party organizations. So basically, when you want to certify a Marriott hotel, they need to submit their assessment to this third body party that check if they are complying with the criteria that was set up on a framework and which level they achieve. What our kind of product, C2C certified products, allows is to be able to achieve higher or lower score on this kind of sustainability green building schemes. There are some schemes for other industries rather than buildings, but I need to agree that the building level, they are a bit more ahead on that kind of area.
I think that's one of the opportunity pillars, really, because we don't, for cruise marine industry that I know of, there is no legislation that's even creating standards. Yeah. It's kind of confusing, and it's a totally different animal. You don't have a fixed property on land that's in a metropolitan area where you can source 300 miles around the perimeter to meet LEED Platinum or something. Yeah. You have ships being built in certain countries, or you have dry docks being done all around the world. And every ship has a different flag state, which has a different IMO regulation, which, it's just the reason why we probably are having this conversation now and not 20 years ago is because there are a lot of hurdles. But, if we, with the energy that's happening right now and the discussions and the shift in importance of sustainability, it's a really great time now that we can put our heads together and figure out how to solve this, because we will absolutely be hospitality industry leaders because we have so many more layers that we have to jump over. But we'll get there, yeah.
Sure. Amazing. Yeah, at the end of the day, that gives recognition as well by consumers or counterparts as well, how sustainable your cruise or your organization is as well, and also allows some benchmarking as well. So that's the kind of like the approach behind. But yeah, still, yeah.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, did you?
Yeah, just one quick comment again from the vendor side. If you really strategically embrace this sustainability and work with it on a strategic level, and yes, it takes a lot of time, yes, it costs a lot of money, and yes, it is very difficult, I can promise you it also opens a lot of doors, not alone now, but also in the future. So also if you are a vendor, it also gives you a competitive advantage to those that are not working with it. So we, at least at Dansk Wilton, we have seen it as a tremendous positive thing that we made that decision many years ago that we want to work with this on a strategic level. And that's where we choose the cradle-to-cradle certification system to guide us into the right direction. And coming from Denmark, I just saw here a couple of weeks ago the big Danish, the Bang & Olufsen, famous audio TV manufacturer, also adapted the cradle-to-cradle philosophy on their products. So the more the big guys and players are adapting this one, my smile becomes bigger, because it just shows us we've made the right decision.
I just want to share an experience that I had actually for our last new build ship with Dansk, actually, where we had an opportunity, even though it wasn't a prototype ship, to change the schemes for the cabins. And, you know, as an owner, we have many partners. And so I partnered with 3 different vendors to figure out, okay, how are we going to achieve this scheme? So all 3 vendors were absolutely excellent and wonderful, and gave products that met the design brief. What we ended up selecting Dansk for the specification because honestly, they hit all of the marks. They hit the sustainability mark, not just from the upfront side, but the whole cycle. The design process was excellent. The product was affordable, which is very important, especially when you're negotiating with new build. And it was durable. And so, you know, I just want to share that example because it is out there. And you know, it was a really great collaboration, and I thank you for that with your team, because it was pretty cool. Yeah.
So just a question here. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you very much. We're seeing in a lot of our land-based work that the guest is actually driving this initiative. They're beginning to want to go to restaurants that have good sustainability and provable sustainability credentials. Do you see that happening in your world?
Well, I'm glad you said that, because that's actually the question on my list here, which tick. Yeah, I think that would be really interesting. Behaviours. Driving.
I've seen the example with Marriott. It's a good example. They know their guests, so they are extremely focused on it. And a lot of new Marriott properties in the future will be even platinum rated in the LEED system, because they know that their guests, the future generation of guests, when they look on TripAdvisor, they will not look on stars on how good the hotel, but how environmental friendly the hotel is, and which thoughts are behind that. So, and I think also you talked about demographics. The cruise guest today is probably plus 60. But what about the next generation of cruisers and holiday makers? They are thinking a little bit different than those going on a holiday today.
Yeah, I would say there's definitely a shift.
Yeah.
And now, you know, there's a cruise for everyone now, which is awesome. I didn't see that 20 years ago. But let's say the expedition sector is, you know, at the forefront of sustainability. They're not going to shoulder the load of the entire cruise industry. It really needs to be in an entire industry. So although there are guests that are demanding it, my passion and hope would be that we would be ahead of that, because by the time we have enough guests demanding it, it's going to be kind of late, right? Because they're going to choose land-based experiences that have already done that over us trying to catch up to make sure that everything is sustainable. That's why we're having these conversations now, you know.
Yeah, I mean, in my world, I see the B2C demanding increasing every week almost. I mean, at C2C Certify, we receive lots of questions and queries about how organizations can purchase more sustainable products, but we also receive lots of questions around, I want to build my own house or my own property, how many products I am available. So even the use of our product register, we can track the kind of demographics, and we see that there's a great appetite for that, from consumers to driving this kind of agenda around sustainability. I know from other industries that, I mean, these days, when you compare one flight to the other, for instance, you're already looking at criteria like carbon. Not everyone, but that's definitely where it is leading. I mean, if we buy something online, some platforms already allow us to choose in terms of transportation, carbon impact, environmental impact as well. So that's already there. So and again, and going back to the European Commission, they are doing some work in terms of this awareness for consumers, also to avoid the greenwashing and the being like seeing at things and being more conscious when they are receiving information from different organizations.
I'm conscious of time because I have so many questions around from everything from traceability, but I wanted to maybe end with a question as well around cabin design, and how do we push that agenda item from a responsible cabin design to the top leaderships and to decision makers, and how do we, as both designers, legislation, vendors, how do we support that to be able to, what's needed, I suppose, is the question.
You're looking at me, so
I'm looking at all of you.
That's a really big question, and I would encourage you to not think about it as a top-down method. You know, don't wait for your cruise owners to demand this. I think it would be more productive and a quicker pace if we're all figuring out what these strategies are to just present that, you know, as the discussion instead of wait to be asked for it. There's a lot that's being done, but again, as I mentioned, there's so much we can learn from each other that I think that's really important for the next steps. And, you know, from the cruise brands demanding that from vendors, or from the vendors and design specifiers, not demanding but educating or discussing or putting it at forefront on the table of discussion to the cruise brands, I think could be really important, especially in cabin design, cabin refurbishment, which is so much volume. It's really, to me, it's low-hanging fruit because you have huge volume that is a handful of specs, versus when you're doing public areas, you have, you know, 20 of this and 500 yards of that, and that's harder to trace and to manage. But for cruise ships cabin design, you have tens of thousands of this and then thousands of yards of that and panels, and so it's a good place to have that conversation to start.
So what else from you guys, kind of final point, what else is needed? I know we talked about simple steps, we talked about awareness, but is there anything else that we feel we want to bring to the table that's just needed to kind of keep this conversation going and make change?
As again, from a vendor perspective, if you don't embrace sustainability, at least in our company, we are almost 60 years old, and I don't think we will have another 60 years if we don't embrace this in a very professional way and take our responsibility together with hotel operators, cruise ship lines, and make sure that the product we develop in the first place are as healthy as possible, and then make sure that the waste we generate on a later stage is being recycled into new material. That's that problem we have to work together and fix it.
I think I would add that defining priorities. I mean, these days, especially because we are exposed so many different ways how to live more sustainable, sometimes we can just be overwhelmed with the amount of information and new roadmaps, reports, targets, everything. It's just start trying to focus what is really a priority for your organization, for your design team, what we want to target first, and then what is the roadmap to achieve that? Because these days it's so easy to do a claim or a pledge. The problem is how you achieve there. So it's instead of going for the big picture, think about what is the priority. Are we focused on the design? Are we focused on the end of life, on the waste? And one organization is not equal to the other. I mean, everyone needs to collaborate, but what works for one might not be exactly what works for others. So kind of focus areas, that's kind of like our recommendation in terms of, and then you will build up, you will scale up from that probably as well.
Yeah, I think what's needed is for this conversation to be in all of our conversations as we're doing our jobs, right? What's needed is a central platform of communication and education, as we talked about, and you know, this platform is an amazing opportunity for that. You know, if you have this feeling in your heart that you want to be a part of something to contribute, now's the time. You know, contact John Ingleton or Toby or myself, anyone on this panel, because we will be collecting, you know, names of people, and it's not really on a business standpoint. It's going to be a lot of work, so you really have to feel it and want to make a difference, and then we'll figure out how to attack these pillars a chunk at one piece of elephant at a time, and go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. I think we have time for one more final quick question from you guys before we wrap up. Is there any Bernie? There's one back here.
Hello, I'm a carpet manufacturer from Poland, and I want to appreciate my colleague Dan Swilton, Soren, for them efforts. In the daily business, we compete hardly, but I really enjoy to hear that. One more comment. Sustainability is a cost, and we cannot miss this subject. So sustainability needs solidarity among all the decision makers. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, if we had a lot more time, there was about 4 questions I had here talking about that balance. And I think, do one of you want to address that balance when it comes to aesthetics, cost, durability, life cycle? There's so many factors to consider.
I think there's one word that's called trade-offs that's quite important to bring to the table. What is important, and how we will balance this sustainability with the costs, with the aesthetics and everything. And it needs to be done in a balanced way that gives you at the end what you need, but also like how to mitigate and reduce the impacts of the future, and eventually to the close heart to the future generations and how they can live in a more sustainable way as well. I think I'll probably try to just suggest like the close to our heart. And I think what I feel in these kind of areas is that everyone is really keen to collaborate, to share. So don't feel afraid or shy to just ask, to kind of or approach organizations and how we did this, what was the business model, because probably in most of the cases people are really keen to kind of share and exchange their ideas and what worked, also what doesn't work, because that's quite important as well.
And I think in one of our discussions, you know, we met beforehand a couple of occasions. Guys actually made what I thought was a really both poetic point, really around, yes, price is a huge factor, and it is going to be, and hopefully price will be driven down as demand. But I think, and hopefully I'm quoting him correctly, he said something on the lines of, if we don't make change, there won't be an industry. And so, yes, price is a factor, but at some point we need to draw a line in the sand and start making change, or the industry isn't here any longer. behaviours and legislation will change the future of the industry, and we've got to be ahead of that.
Yeah, and price, honestly, it's not just sustainability and product. Everything is a price discussion right now. And the way that we can tackle that is, as Anna said, trade-offs. As cruise brands, you know, we should be consistent about this message, but also the reality is we're going to have to choose less of something to have more of something else. And so the hope is, you know, the more that we can leverage scale and the more that there's design development on the vendor side and on the legislation side, we'll eventually get there. You know, I think, you know, what Travera was 20 years ago was, you know, like 3 different options. And now it's just this entire wall of resources, you know, like just a small example. But there will be trade-offs, but, you know, there will be advantages in the future if we start leveraging that now. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for being part of the panel today and bringing such insight and to the discussion. And thank you everyone here for coming. I have 4 things I need to tell you, the housekeeping bits that I've been given to just make an announcement here at the end. So first of all, before you head off, you're invited to have your say. If you head over to a video booth, which you can find 1 row behind the conference theatre, please share your thoughts and, on any of these issues that we've talked about. We'd love to hear about your thoughts. And then the second one is please shop the floor. I think we've got about an hour and 15 minutes or so to visit and take the opportunity to meet with suppliers in person. The third one is if you can vacate this conference theatre, just from a housekeeping point of view, we need to be able to clean it from a COVID point of view. So that would be really appreciated. And then if we want to have any further discussions, we can have that out on the floor. And then the last one is really just to tell you about the next conversation that will be happening. The next topic is called 100 Ways to Blow the Budget. Sounds really exciting. That's at 3:30 if you want to join back here. Thank you so much. Thank you. And enjoy the rest of the conference.